we got you beat over here. And so I'm glad to be here amongst this panel to talk about economic opportunities for particularly for Black women. And I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Julie. Next,
You're
we
welcome.
have Sabrina Stratton. She is the Senior Vice President of Northeast Regional Director. Welcome, Sabrina. You have a few words.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. I extend my sincere appreciation to Oxfam and my fellow panelists for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. I've spent my entire career, for the most part, in the financial services sector, with most recently, I work for Amalgamated Bank and serve as Northeast Regional Director, overseeing our commercial bank. My personal experience, though, with banks began long before my career. Right after college, I vividly recall walking into a bank with very little knowledge of how accounts worked. And fortunately, someone took the time to really explain good money management, leaving a lasting impact on me. This experience really sparked my interest in banking and drives my commitment to equitable financial access today. Throughout my 20-plus career in banking, I've always tried to make sure equity was a part of the conversation, which is why it was an easy decision for me to move over to Amalgamated Bank, the country's largest socially responsible bank, where I was part of a team to create a $100 million racial equity loan fund, among other successes. Amalgamated Bank, just a little bit for you all, was started by a union of immigrant women when they found that the banking system at that time was not equitable. Throughout our 100-plus year history, we have prioritized providing banking solutions and advocating for the most marginalized through our work with unions, nonprofit, foundations, and other organizations. I definitely am looking forward to being a part of the discussion today and taking part in such an important conversation. Thank you again, Cassandra.
Thank you, Sabrina. Next, we have Dr. Gloria Bromell Tinubu. She is the applied economist and agricultural economist at Tuskegee University. Dr. Tinubu.
Yes, thank you, Cassandra, and good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be here and honored that I was asked to participate on this illustrious panel of amazing young women who are doing amazing things. It's kind of, I'm a little bit perturbed right now because of the ruling by the court here in Georgia regarding the Fearless Fund. So today, while I had certain prepared remarks, I'm going to incorporate some of my feelings concerning that as well. We know that Black women business owners are powering this economy and growing fast, but to have this fund be challenged in the way that it was is a cry or a call for us to unleash our potential when it comes to economics and business ownership. We have to respond to this attack in a very fierce way and be afraid and fearless in our response. So I'm excited to be here and look forward to our discussion.
Dr. Tinubu, I'm so glad you brought that up, and we stand in solidarity with the Fearless Fund as well. I know all of us do, and so looking forward to educating the public and bringing in that conversation. And last but not least, we have Rahama Wright. She's the founder and CEO of Shea Yaleen. Rahama.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Cassandra, and thank you, Oxfam, for facilitating this conversation. It's such an important one. I am the founder of Shea Yaleen, which is a DC-based social impact beauty brand I started after serving in the Peace Corps after college. And what my company does is we help women in rural communities of northern Ghana take this seed, which is the shea seed. It grows exclusively in sub-Saharan Africa, and they transform it into an oil that I'm sure everyone here knows about, shea butter. And then we create retail-ready products that we distribute to US retailers. And through this business model, we increase women's income 5 times their country's minimum wage. And at the foundation of our business model is how to incorporate women who historically have been in the informal market and have not been included in formal markets included in global supply and value chains in a way that allows them to address systemic poverty in their communities. Through building this business, we're able to see that women are in a position to send their kids to better schools, access health services, access better nutrition. And it's a real example of how, if you can create business models that include women who have historically been excluded into formal markets, you can really see advancements in their ability to generate sufficient income to care for themselves and their children. And we are replicating this model in Washington, D.C. I live in D.C., and we are building the first commercial shared beauty manufacturing facility in Ward 7. For those of you who know about the various wards in DC, it's one of the wards that historically has been underserved. And what we're doing is we're building a facility that will help other beauty brand owners run by Black women, run by women of color, who have issues addressing manufacturing constraints. And so the beauty industry is a huge one in the US. Black women, we are one of the biggest consumers of beauty products. And the reality is not enough of our businesses actually generate sufficient income. And so what we're doing is we're addressing some of those barriers to entry and creating a facility that will allow for brand owners to access resources as well as access manufacturing solutions so that they can launch and grow amazing personal care and wellness brands. So I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much for that. That's really inspiring and exciting. And I said the name of the company wrong. So it's Shailene.
That's correct. Yaleen
Okay.
is Bambara. It's the language I learned when I was Peace Corps volunteer, and it means light and hope. So we're bringing light to the issues of disparities for these women that we work with, and hope by giving them access to living wage jobs.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I understand here at the Mississippi Black Women's Roundtable, we push an agenda called the Mississippi Women's Economic Security Initiative, where we're advocating for increasing in wages, right? And we understand that we got to be innovative, and we also got to hold, elected officials accountable and companies accountable on how they are treating and paying our women. So let's jump right into the conversation, and I am going to start with you, Julie. I'm sorry, with you, Dr. Tinubu. So, Dr. Tinubu, 4 decades ago, you sounded the alarm on the institutionalized land theft experienced by Southern Black family landowners and the role that played in wealth disparities. Now, over 40 years later, new economic opportunities for family landowners are being created by federal agencies, including USDA and FEMA. And today you are a lead researcher and author of Tuskegee's annual report, State of African Americans in the Black Belt. Can you share some of the historic policies and politics that resulted in Black women's overrepresentation in low-wage jobs and low-wealth communities? You're on mute.
Thank you, Cassandra. In order to really give the audience a good sense of why we're where we are today in terms of the overrepresentation of Black women in low-wage jobs and low-wealth communities, we have to start with the beginning of this country, the founding of this place, right? And I want to share with you a quote from one of my favorite writers, Lerone Bennett. He wrote a book, The Shaping of Black America. And if you have not read that book, I want to make that assignment to you as a former professor at Spelman for nearly 20 years and currently an associate professor at Tuskegee. I want to just let me share a couple of things with you. This is what he said. He said, "A nation is a choice. It chooses itself at fateful forks in the road by turning left or right, by giving up something or taking something. And in the giving up and the taking, in the deciding and not deciding, the nation becomes." Then he goes on to say, America became America that way. Fork by fork, it became America that way. America, or to be more precise, the men who spoke in the name of America decided that it was going to be a white place defined negatively by the bodies and the blood of the reds and the black. And that decision, which was made in the 1660s, a policy decision, and elaborated over a 200-year period, foreclosed certain possibilities in America, perhaps forever, and set off depth charges that are still echoing and re-echoing in the Commonwealth. What makes this all the more mournful is that it didn't have to happen that way. There was another road, but that road wasn't taken. In the beginning, as we have seen, there was no race problem in America. The race problem in America was a deliberate invention of men who systematically separated blacks and whites in order to make money. So that's the foundation. That's the stage, right? And we would later on see that Black women, as a part of this process, were then used as the basis for enslaving generations of people after that, because slaves were defined by the status of their mother. So Black women were enslaved, so all of their forebears were their descendants rather were considered enslaved. So Black women was the integral tool that was used in policy from the early days. So we lead up to the Civil War. So from 1607, when the King of England first sent the Virginia Company, which was a private company of investors. So this country was started by folks who were trying to make money in the colonization game, right? Maximizing profits, and supported by the King of England because they were in poverty because of the enclosure movement and all that stuff. So that's how this country got started, right? And those policies forever have shaped the trajectory of Black people and Black women in particular in this country. So we get to the American Revolution, which didn't change anything for Black people and Black women because we continue to be enslaved. And then we have the short period of Reconstruction that began some changes for us, but then that was short-lived. And then we had 100 years of Jim Crow. But in 1862, President Lincoln created the Department of Agriculture, which was affirmative action for the plantation owners. Because we know, if you've been keeping up with what's happening there, they were exclusively used to benefit white farmers. And so from 1607 to today, this country has been really affirmative action for the majority, and nothing really crumbs for the rest of us. In the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, they passed laws that did certain things to benefit us, but they also gave George Wallace and some other folks the Appalachian Regional Commission, which they got $1 billion to begin to pour into many of the southern states. So financially, even during the Civil Rights Movement, the South was rewarded for going along with the Civil Rights Movement, just as they were rewarded for going along or as a result of the Civil War movement. So today, we are still, as Lerone Bennett said, echoing and re-echoing all of this stuff. And it's because of what this nation is and who it was founded for. And I want to share one final quote by Alexander Stephens of Georgia. And it's only appropriate that we talk about him. He was the vice president of the Confederacy. This is what he said in 1861, right after Lincoln was elected president. He said, "Our new government, which is a confederacy, was founded on slavery. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstones rest upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, and that slavery, which is submission to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This is our new government, is our new government is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. It wasn't just the Confederacy, it was this entire country that was based on that philosophy, that the Negro was not equal to the white man, right? So this is the foundation that was laid. And we've been struggling with this for centuries. And unless we shift the trajectory and begin to use the consumer purchasing power that we have and directing our resources to Black women, business owners, to meet unmet needs in our communities, we're going to continue to have the struggle. So for me, I'm 71, I'm a grandmother. My grandchildren and my grandsons and granddaughter will not inherit this mess if I have anything to do with it. So I'm ready to fight, y'all. I'm ready to take it to whomever we need to take it to so that we can create a path that is not the path that we've been on since 1619 when we came into this country. So I don't know how much time I have left or if I've gone over my time.
You are good on your time right now.
All right. So thank you so much. We'll talk more, but we have all that we need to take it to the next level. And we can start here in Georgia, just like we started with the election on the political side. It's now time for us to have an economic revolution led by Black women in Georgia.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tinubu. You have kicked us off. I got hearts all on the screen. You have fired us up. Absolutely. And I think about this so much on the lasting impacts of it being left also in the South, and still where we have a majority of Black people in the South, and where we have households led by women, majority of them are Black women in the South. And so let's just keep going. This is good conversation. Julie, so you heard Dr. Tinubu outline some of the historic and institutional challenges that have attempted to lock Black women into low wage and essential jobs and undermine their economic mobility. As the executive director of the Council of Black Architecture and Engineering Companies, can you share the role of local government contracts in upward economic mobility and the key barriers or challenges that Black women-owned firms face in winning city and state contracts? This is an important conversation.
I'm sorry, y'all. It is an important conversation, and Dr. Tinubu has me fired up as well. Goodness, I want to go outside and just really get to work on anything to make us go further. But one of the things that I put a lot of my energy and effort into is public policy around public contracting. Public contracting is anywhere between 50 and 20% of our GDP of our economy. Think about it. Anything you can think about, the government buys, from designing and constructing schools, parks, airports, hospitals, playgrounds, providing health services, daycare, repairing roads, bridges, IT, consulting, food, beverages, you name it, the government buys. And I think what we're looking at is really focusing on activities where the government's purchasing power can drive economic mobility. Think about this. That purchasing power is one of the biggest job creators that we have in America. And the counterweights, I think someone talked about it earlier, the society are all attached to our jobs, like healthcare, the ability to afford decent housing, educational supplements for our children, transportation. And one of the things that I find that most people view public contracting is, it's like they're giving something away to us, like it's a social program. But truly, the essence of public contracting, because it creates jobs and everything around that that's tangential to that, it's a economic development program. And one of the things that I think that we have to look at when we look at public contracting is intentionality. And one of our biggest barriers is access to opportunities. And so one of the things that I want to talk about is some good public programs and good public policy that really moves forward our economic agenda and our ability to participate in the economy through, one, public contracting, which creates jobs. And one of the first programs I want to talk about is New York City has a community hiring program, and that's they're looking to harness their public procurement opportunities to create local jobs for folks in those communities where these opportunities and these projects are. And I think that's really good because there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you think about, I'm gonna build a bridge, and you think about the engineering and the construction management and some of the professional services, but there are a lot of things that are adjacent to that, that especially low economic women or low to low moderate income women can do on these projects. They hire everything from secretaries to flag folks to you name it, they hire them. And I think that we need to really look at getting into those opportunities because we are in this world-class investment in infrastructure like we haven't seen in this time, any time in history. And I think the USDOT also has a great program where they're looking to expand local hiring and workforce development. And the whole purpose is so that these good jobs can create meaningful careers as well. Because think about this, some of these projects last 20 years. And so if you get on one of these projects in a job, you're going to get higher wages and also have opportunity to have economic means for years. One of the things that I'm excited about the Biden administration that they did is what the first executive order, the first thing he did when he and Vice President Harris took office was he signed Executive Order 13985, which is furthering advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, to harness the power of the federal government to create economic opportunities. And if you look at that executive order, section 7 talks about advancing equitable procurement. And they put in place where the government-wide goal for federal procurement dollars awarded are on all of each agencies and all of these projects to really include socioeconomic disadvantaged individuals. And so they looking at a whole approach of government through procurement to one, create economic opportunities, and these good paying jobs will kind of lessen the wealth gap. That's something that we don't talk about too much. And one of the things that I work with, this wonderful agency in New York, is one of my favorite agencies. And there's a guy there who's really an economic activist, Dr. Keith Wright. We worked together with him and the executive director, Rick Cotton, to put together a discretionary program and a small contracts program so that smaller businesses, smaller women, Black and Latino owned businesses can have an opportunity to compete against each other and discretionary awards with small contracts. Most people tend to think of agencies as having all these big mega projects and big contracts when really they buy in smaller increments. So this was an intentional program set to look at those smaller projects and those smaller opportunities so that they can put them to us so that we can compete against each other and actually be successful in winning. To date, I want to say they've awarded hundreds of $1 millions to small women and economically underserved or underutilized businesses. It's been great. And one other thing that I will talk about that I know that a lot of folks don't know is Section 3 of the 1968 Housing and Development Act. And that says that certain programs that are covered by HUD funds, that they are to the greatest extent feasible, required to provide training, employment, contracting, and other economic opportunities to low and very low income persons. And so, especially those who are the recipients of public housing and to the businesses that are providing services in those areas. And I think looking at the government and the opportunities that they have to drive wealth and create economic opportunities is very important. Just think about this, 20% of our economy, and a lot of us are not involved in it. And I think from when they're buying from food to beverages, there's a lot of us that provide a lot of services that we can take advantage of these economic opportunities. And some of the barriers and access to opportunity is one of the biggest barriers that we have. And through the intentionalities of these programs, that some of the policy that I spoke of, I think we can address some of those. And one of my biggest pet peeve is when I hear them say, "Oh, they don't have the capacity to do work." Well, opportunity creates capacities, not the other way around. And I think we've been as Dr. Said earlier, we've been at the forefront of all this. We lead a lot of this stuff. Think about this. When we were in slavery, we innovated a lot of the things that we use today. We put together a lot of programs. Then when we came out, we had the opportunities to use that. And what they tell us then in slavery, when we were doing all this work, we had all these skills. They wanted us to do all this work. Then as soon as we started asking for equal pay or right to be paid, all of a sudden we have no capacity, no skills, and no ability. Where did it go? Where did it disappear to? So that's where I spend my time and energy, is looking at public policy to address some of these disparities, and especially for our underutilized Black women-owned businesses.
Julie, wow. Did you just
I
say,
know I talked fast and I
Julie,
said a
did you
lot.
just say opportunity creates the capacity?
Opportunity creates
Yes.
capacity.
Yes, yes. And we're going to come back around on that. I completely agree. You got to provide the opportunities for people to, step into these roles and these positions, because now we're talking about, not lifting up that individual, lifting up a household, and that household lifts up a whole community, and they all are interconnected. And so, yes, this is really good. Okay, the next, go ahead. Yes,
I was just going to say, our economy is circular. We're all interdependent on each other.
yes.
And if I can provide a job, I get a contract, I provide a job, I'm going to go buy me some Shailene. And then
Yes.
she's going to be able to keep some people in work. And so that's the one thing that when you listen to all the talk on the economy, it's not Wall Street. It's our street. It's Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard that keeps our economy going. I say that because every community has a MLK Boulevard.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's switch a little bit to solutions and models. Sabrina, you are the head of commercial banking and Amalgamated Bank, um, America's most socially responsible bank. What is the role of the banking sector in closing the racial wealth gap and spurring investment in underserved communities? And more specifically, can you outline some of the steps that low-wage earners can take towards assessing capital to start their own businesses?
Absolutely. And, the first thing I'll do is take the question around discussing the role of the banking sector in closing the racial wealth gap. These are most of what I will say today, all of us know. And, some of this, may be new to you, but a lot of this are facts that we already know exist today, including that the significant earnings gap that exists between Black women, white women, and men drives the racial disparities that we see today. So what I like to let people know is like the primary wealth building years, which is typically ages 20 to 35 for people. Again, I want to stress the wealth building years coincide with the largest earnings gap that Black women face among their white counterparts and white men. This is a critical time where Black women face lower access to higher return generating assets, such as home ownership and investments, but they have higher exposure to higher cost liabilities compared to their white counterparts. So you can see they have lower access to higher return assets, but higher exposure to high cost liabilities. In addition to that, private business owners who contribute significantly to total wealth, even though they only comprise of 15% of the population, comprise and contribute significantly to the total wealth of this country. However, Black business owners, particularly Black women, often are not a part of that, contributing to total wealth, and often have to rely on personal debt rather than bank loans, which are more expensive to be able to fund their financing needs. We all know change is needed, hence why I just want to plug in the Fearless Fund, why funds like that are so critically important, because these disparities exist, and we have funds like the Fearless Fund providing direct solutions to be able to help lower these disparities. So again, just want to express my support with Dr. Tinubu and others with the Fearless Fund. There are a few things that the banking sector can do. One of them is support the Fearless Fund, among other funds, but also increasing business loans, products, and supporting other types of investments that are specifically targeted for Black women. We need a little bit more than the superficial outreach that we often see from the banking sector, where they have these like grand announcements, but then we don't hear anything later on about the results of those. Like, did they really impact the Black community? Investment in the community, investment in programs that help women to be able to achieve the wealth in reducing the racial wealth gap. A couple of things that I'll say from Amalgamated standpoint is we're proud supporters of funds similar to the Fearless Fund, particularly the Entrepreneurs of Color Fund, the Black Vision Fund, where we actually take our dollars within the bank and increase capital for Black and other minority-owned businesses. I want to just, one of the things that I also want to add is it's very important to hire Black women. I think it's, Julie, you mentioned this as well. Like, I'm just using your quote with opportunity creates capacity. When you give Black women the opportunity to lead, especially in the financial services sector, it has been proven without a doubt that profitability increases. I'm proud to say that Amalgamated Bank is led by a Black woman, Priscilla Sims Brown. And since she has taken leadership within our bank, the profitability, we have experienced the highest profitability we've ever experienced in the history of our bank. Now, what happens is when you hire Black women, they in turn approach their hiring process in a little bit more equitable. And when that happens, what you are doing is you are increasing the opportunities that Black women have to be able to be wealth drivers, wealth builders within their personal lives and the communities that they are that are around them. Again, stressing that my perspective is coming from the financial services, and I think there's so much work that needs to be done, including making sure that we're uplifting the voice of Black women in the work that is being done. Now, I'll address the second part of the question, which is regarding low-wage earners can take what roles they can take in accessing capital to start their business. The reason why I started with the responsibility of the financial sector first, because there are structural issues that are set up now that prevent low-wage workers and or workers that Black women and other and Black men from being able to have a successful, thriving business over a long period of time. But when we put those things aside, there are some things that I would just highly recommend that anyone does when thinking about starting a business. One of them being is to take the time to educate yourself on running a business, including developing business plans, financial wellness, measuring profitability, competitive advantage, market analysis, among other things. Most communities have small business hubs through public and private partnerships that are accessible and offer education around what I just mentioned at no cost at all. And I would definitely recommend exploring that. In addition, in most low to moderate income communities, there are what we like to consider community development financial institutions and community banks. These banks typically have a goal to increase financial services in those communities. I would just highly recommend developing a relationship, making sure you know that they exist in your community, developing a relationship with the people that work there, and do this before you need capital. So do this before you need loans. If you're thinking about starting a business, if you're thinking about doing something differently, start developing those relationships. You can visit, you can speak online, you can ask questions. Typically, these kind of community banks and community development financial institutions, known as CDFIs, they are set up to not only provide lending capital and grants, but they're also set up to be able to answer questions and to be able to help you and provide guidance and what they term as technical assistance. Again, these lenders are here to serve underserved communities. Typically, in addition to providing loans, typically their loans are a little bit more lax than banks. So whereas a bank may have these very strict requirements for you to be able to get a loan, typically with CDFIs, they're a little bit more lenient as far as their terms. They also offer grants, as I mentioned, technical assistance, and other support. Just want to round out the conversation by saying that, again, a lot of work needs to be done from the financial sector standpoint, from financial institutions to really use their power use their their kind of influence in the market to really make a change and really make this process more equitable. So thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. I think you said something really important, which was it's really important to hire Black women. And when we're hiring Black women, and I always say, when you put Black women in any space, we are thinking about not just ourselves, but our families, our communities. And so it's really good to have you in that space, and Priscilla as well, and you being a part of this important conversation, because we know when Black women are there, we are there, not just a face, but we bring expertise, and we also are bringing problem-solving solutions for our community. So thank you for that. We'll round off this first part of this conversation with Rahama. You have been an entrepreneur for almost 20 years, and congratulations to you for that. You are now building a beauty maker space in Southeast DC, Ward 7. Is it Ward 7?
Yeah, Ward 7.
Which is chronically underserved. So can you just tell us a little bit why this venture, why now, and your advice for other Black women entrepreneurs, especially women who are currently earning minimum wage. Yeah. And right now in Mississippi, minimum wage is still $7.25.
Wow.
So can we just talk through that?
Yeah, well, really quickly, Cassandra, I just wanted to piggyback and respond to some of the things I've been hearing, because all of it has just been so rich. And from a policy perspective, Julie, when you were talking, one of the things that really stood out to me is that there have been programs in other communities that our institutions have supported, but for some reason they don't want to support those programs in Black communities. So that's one thing that I think is really important. For example, universal basic income. Alaska, since the late 70s, has been doing this for their residents and for people who live in Alaska. That's a clear program that we can look at, where they essentially have created a public trust where households, if you live in Alaska, if you're a resident of Alaska, you get a check from the government for your household, anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000. We need that in our communities. Reparations now. Reparations now. Reparations now. We need to stop playing around as a Black community. Collectively, we need to demand reparations, period. Dr. Tinubu, you really gave us the historical perspective, and the truth that we all know is that the US would not be the US without the free labor of enslaved Africans. Black people were not slaves, we were enslaved. We need to change that language. We were never slaves. We were enslaved, subjugated, oppressed. And that needs to be compensated. We need reparations for that. And that is not a freebie. It is not, giving us extra help. This is what we deserve as a demographic block in this society, period. And that is something that we need to collectively agree on and fight for. So from a policy perspective, we've seen this. Other groups have gotten reparations. The Jewish community got reparations. The Japanese community got reparations. There are very clear models that we can point to and say, well, they got it. Why aren't we getting it? And I think that that is something from a policy perspective, as well as just us as a community boldly asking, boldly fighting for these things. Because here's the truth. No one's coming to save us, and no one's going to be fighting for us. We have to do it ourselves. And that's the reality that we live in. With that, I think it's really important that also to Sabrina, what you were talking about, everything that we are discussing is about systems. Every single thing that we are experiencing as Black people in this country and as Black people globally is because of intentional systems that were created, implemented, funded, supported to ensure that we stay back and behind. And so for me, the only way we change this is by creating new systems. It's not simply breaking down the systems that historically have been racist, but it's about how do we create new systems? How do we challenge those systems, not only simply by using our voice and objecting, but by saying, you know what, we're going to build different things. And to your point, Dr. Tinubu, it is about putting dollars into our businesses and being unapologetic about supporting Black businesses, period. That is so critical and important. And so I've been an entrepreneur since my early 20s. I had no business being an entrepreneur. I had never taken a business class. I knew nothing about financial models, nothing about, marketing, none of that. All I knew is I was a Peace Corps volunteer in a community where I saw consistently people who did not deserve to be living at such levels of poverty, living at those levels of poverty, and knowing very well that their labor and their knowledge, someone else was financially benefiting from that. And that's some of the things we need to talk about here. People are financially benefiting from Black people daily. We are contributing to our economies locally and global economies, and we are not benefiting from that, but other people are. And I think that that's the fallacy that we see often in traditional media. It's like Black people are just chilling in their homes, not doing anything. No, we are actually tremendous contributors to the global economic system. Yet for some reason, when we say we should also benefit from our labor, from our knowledge, it becomes a problem. And that's what we're seeing with the Fearless Fund. And so what we need to do is call out what these things are, name them, and build new systems. And so being an entrepreneur, seeing and being a volunteer and seeing these disparities, it's what brought me to become an entrepreneur. I did not plan to do this. I wanted to become a foreign service officer and work at embassies globally. But after living in these villages and seeing the disparities, I said to myself, there's got to be another way. There's got to be something that can be done. And again, I had no business doing this. Because if you looked at what I had in terms of resources, I didn't have very much. I knew nothing about the beauty industry, nothing about supply chains. I did not have any money. I didn't come from a wealthy family. I am African on my mom's side from Ghana. And so I did have that emotional connection to the region and to the community. And so over the last 2 decades, I've been thoughtfully building this brand in a way that incorporates these women into our supply chain. And one of the things that I've realized is a couple of things. One, we are more than capable of smashing these institutions and creating our own. I did it with absolutely no resources. And to your point, Julie, it's the opportunities that open the doors that allow us to fully realize our potential, right? 2, there is an inherent opportunity between Black people in America and Black people on the continent and in the Caribbean, everywhere you see Black people. Until we figure out how to create a stronger bond between the diaspora, we are going to continue perpetuating these issues. We need to figure out, Africa as a continent has some of the fastest growing economies in the world. Everyone is racing to the continent to figure out what they can do to land grab, to control natural resources, because those natural resources are powering the rest of the world. Black people in America need to show up on the continent and actively participate in this economic development. The third thing is we need to build systems in our communities here that have been overlooked and underserved for decades. Building this facility in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where we continue to see wide disparities and economic inequality between Black folks and white people in this city, and intentionally building something that is addressing a very clear pain point around manufacturing, is the types of systems we want to be building in our communities. Right now in the beauty industry, McKinsey estimates that over the $60 billion that is made in the US beauty industry, Black businesses only capture 1.5 billion of that 60 billion, despite Black customers shopping 6.6 billion annually. We want that entire 6.6 billion in our community. If we're the ones buying it, it needs to be going into our businesses. But here's the reality. Even though people love to say Black women are starting businesses at a higher percent, the reality is we're also closing businesses at a higher percent. The reality is that over 96% of Black businesses in America are not employer businesses, they're sole proprietorships. The reality is, according to JP Morgan Chase, if you're a Black woman running a business in America, you're generating less than $25,000 a year. Those are the things that we're navigating through. So what does that mean? It means that we need to have resources that are financing us. So this is why the attack on the Fearless Fund is absolutely insanity. It means that we need to have the mentorship and the new relationships that can open doors and unlock opportunities with retailers, with government contracts, with funding, and then, of course, the technical support to understand how to build a business. I've literally failed my way to the success I've had. Then that part of the reason it's taken so long is because of all of these systemic things that I'm talking about. And so I want to get back to why we're building this space. If you are in the beauty and wellness industry, or you are selling a product, you can't sell what you can't make. Back in the 60s and 70s, Black people in the beauty industry owned manufacturing. They were making their own products. When we think about Madam C.J. Walker and what she did, she was making her own products. She was building factories. And then what happens in the 80s and 90s is a lot of the factories and the manufacturing that was Black owned, Black led started getting bought up by large conglomerates, right? And up until now, we do not have as much ownership in the manufacturing industry, not just in beauty, but in every vertical that we see, in every sector that we see. So for me, I want to be able to, for our community to own sourcing, to own manufacturing and distribution. It's not simply just one part of the supply chain. We want to own all of it. And we can, and we should, because we are participating in all of it. So building this facility 5-10 years down from now, what we want to be able to show is that we have small businesses, indie businesses in the beauty and personal care sector, run by Black people, run by people of color, who are owning manufacturing, who are owning as much of the process as possible. And we've been able to do that because we've tapped into resources like local government grants. Sabrina, we've worked with a local CDFI, the Washington Area Community Investment Fund. We've tapped into corporate philanthropy. To date, we've raised over $1 million to build this facility, and we're almost at the finish line. And I'll just leave here because I know we're going into Q&A. Ownership is so important. And none of this is a handout. This is what we deserve. This is what we boldly come together and ask for, because as you said, Dr. Tinubu, you don't want your grandchildren growing up dealing with the same issues that we have dealt with. And the only way we can do that is by building our own systems.
Amen, amen. Amen. If I was in church and had my napkin, I'll just do like that. But I'm just do the paper. And amen. That is so right. We're talking about a system, and I think you ended where Dr. Tinubu began, which is this was a deliberate system that was created. And so, to keep Black folks, Black women, Black families oppressed. And now it's going to also take Black women to build these solutions to rebuild the system and impact the system, to do the systems change work. And we're all in that. And so, wow, thank you. This was so incredible. We will go into Q&A. So I'm just going to ask folks, if you have questions, go ahead and populate them into the chat, and we're going to get an opportunity to respond to that, so you all can talk back, and you will be able to come off mute and ask those questions. I believe that is correct. And my tech people can tell me if that makes sense. As you all are doing that, I just have one other question that I want to ask our panelists. I think some of you all have already talked about this, which is, what solutions, again, what can people do? Is there a way they can get involved? So I think some of you all kind of hit on this, but if you have opportunity, anyone can speak. What can people do and how can they get involved? And we know there are diverse people that's on this call, but we want the folks on the call or on the webinar to be able to take this back to community, and we will be sharing this recording as well. So what can people do and how can they get involved? Dr. Tanibu, you got off mute right away, and then I'm gonna get to you, Julie.
So one of the things is that we can do is this. Blacks account in Georgia. Let's look at its state of Georgia. Black account for 33% of the population, generate only 2% of the revenues in the state of Georgia. 33% of the population, 2% of the revenues, and 5% of business ownership. We need to change that. That's the first thing we got to work towards. And we've got to set some goals for 2030 over the next 6 years. And by 2040, we need to be in parity with the population. And we can put in place systems, as Sister Rahama said, that we can make that happen, right? Whites population is 52%. They account for 88% of the revenues, the business revenues. So you see where our revenues are going. We need to get busy. And they account for 79% of all business ownership. We account for 5%. They account for 55% of the population, 79% of business ownership, and 88% of business revenues. There was a study done by McKinsey & Company that says that there's over, and by the way, Blacks in the state of Georgia generate $128 billion in consumer spending. So we have the dollars already circulating within our community that can be spent with Black-owned businesses. McKinsey & Company did a survey that says right now, Blacks are underserved. There's about $300 billion nationally that could go to Black-owned businesses or any kind of business. And like the sister said, it needs to come to us because we are being underserved in 5 areas: in food, in housing, in healthcare, in broadband, and in banking, my sister Sabrina. Those 5 areas. There's no reason why we can't begin to generate businesses to meet that underserved demand. It's about $300 billion in business that they indicated. And they've even said that Blacks are even willing to spend a little bit more money for those services if they're the right kind of services. And who know better what the right kind of services Black folks need than Black women? I'm going to stop for right now because I want to give my other sisters the opportunity to say something.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Yes. One of the things that I think we can do is really educate, inform, and engage. And all of these programs and opportunities we talk about, I think it's on us. Before social media and all this, now we have a bigger platform. We knew about everything that was going on in the program. We had a drumbeat, we had a underground communication network, and we got to get that back going. Think about this. I talked about public contracting. $1 trillion of the economy is that. And we participate at a rate of Black women 0.2% of public contracts. And it's sad, and I think we need to change that. How can we be locked out of 20% of the economy? Think what that would mean with home ownership and everything else that's important to us. And so I think that we need to make sure that we inform, let folks know that these programs are out there, get certified if you need to, take whatever free opportunity, technical assistant classes, because there's a lot. Almost every agency has something. I talked about the Port Authority. They do things to really put us in place to engage and be a part of it. And that's on us to really move and motivate our folks and pull everybody along to do that.
Thank you. Great comments. I don't know if Sabrina, Rahama, if you all want to share anything. And then Cameron, I'm just going to ask if anyone have their hands up. We can't see that part. You could take them off you, but I'll take it over to Rahama and then Sabrina.
Yes, no, of course, supporting companies like mine, Shailene, Yaleen Beauty. I will drop some links in the chat, and I know that the organizers will also share our contact information. But write your local politicians. I think being politically involved is very important, even though sometimes it feels like we're just not making the progress. And when we do make progress, we get rolled back. So it can be an exhausting process. But I think that it's really important for us to be actively involved in the political process. Writing our representatives, the Fearless Fund is a great example that we can rally around. But show up at the city council meetings, show up at the PTA meetings, run for office. And there are programs like Vote, Run, Lead that help Black people get into political office. And I think that it's not just one thing that is going to address a lot of these systemic issues. It takes all sorts of people, all sorts of sectors, the private sector, the public, small business owners, teachers. It takes all of us. But I also think too, this is such an important thing, is there is a mindset, right? That the things that we're experiencing as Black people, I think that quote that you were talking about earlier, Dr. Tinubu, where it's like, this is how we're just naturally supposed to be oppressed, is a fallacy. But I do think that that is a mindset that has been perpetuated for hundreds of years. And unfortunately, we need to be healed from that mindset. And we as a community need to boldly and aggressively stand up for ourselves. And this honestly is a time where we need to all be 10 toes down. This is a 10 toes down situation. And we all need to say, you know what, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You can't do this to us anymore.
Nope.
And it requires us to be in, what is the word? Like, I don't know if you all remember when Issa Rae at the Golden Globes, I think, she was like, I'm supporting everyone Black.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She said that. And then t-shirts started coming out, support everyone Black. We just need to say that this is where we are. We are supporting our institutions. We are supporting each other. We are supporting our businesses. And we're not going to apologize about that. Because again, if we want to change this for the next generation, we have to be bold and aggressive and demand it. And I think we see other people doing it and it seems to work for them, right? I'm not gonna, this is being recorded. I don't want it to come back. But we need to be as aggressive as some other groups are when it comes to demanding the things they feel they deserve.
Absolutely. Sabrina?
I will be quick because I know we're at time. I will say, like, everyone should understand the power of their dollar, the power of their voice when it comes to financial systems. Think about, with everything that you do, whether it's, your bank or, where you shop at for hair products, where you shop at for anything, what are those companies, what are those people doing to support Black people? And can you divert those dollars to Black businesses? I think everyone needs to do that hard assessment. We say this day in and day out, but when I hear statistics like the one Rahama mentioned around only $1 billion out of $6 billion is being diverted to Black businesses, we really need to be doing a very critical self-assessment with where our money is going. So I'll leave everyone with that. It is very important to do that. And then also one other thing is, if you don't want to run for office, if you don't, feel like you can't make time to show up to meetings, et cetera, then support the organizations and people who are doing this work, because they need your support. So remember, we support with time, and we support with money. So please do that. And if all else fails, let's create a new system.
You know what? I wanted to add one thing that I think we needed. You talked about the Fearless Fund. One thing that's important to note is that those folks used a 1860 law that was made for us coming out of slavery against us. This anti-D&I, which now I said it stands for discrimination, exclusion, and injustice. they are taking everything that was put in place to redress Jim Crow and turning it against us. So we're at a major inflection time. And Ms. Wright, I can't agree with you even more. Everything you said, everything that everyone said is inspiring, but I think that's important to understand the context of where we're going with all of our conversation.
Yes. Dr. Tanubu. And then we do have a question in here.
Okay, do you want to address that question first? And I'll save my comment.
Okay, let me get to the question. So Charlene Tarvin says that she lives and works in Syracuse, New York, which has the highest concentration of Black and Brown child poverty in the nation. We host an expo incubator and are developing an affordable housing project. However, it's been very difficult to secure corporate and philanthropic funding because we are not in the major metropolitan market. Despite the need for entrepreneurial-led economic development companies like Chase, Amazon, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Starbucks, they don't invest in Black women here. Are there any suggestions for her?
I'll jump in, and I'm happy to talk with Charlene one-on-one. If we can exchange contact information, I'm not sure. I can definitely provide some suggestions. I think, there are alliances that you can check with. Just know, one thing that I hate to answer it like this is that there's a lot of people looking for corporate funding, and a lot of people with initiatives specifically focused on reducing the racial wealth gap and investing in Black women. And I think part of some of the issues you may be finding is that, there's only been so many dollars out there. But I'm happy to provide some direct guidance, if that makes sense. And again, would love to be able to share my contact information. Maybe I'll just put it in the chat for everyone, any person that wants to follow up with me.
I'd like to briefly respond to that. There has to be something called reciprocity. The dollars that we pour into Coca-Cola and Walmart and Amazon and Starbucks, the billions of dollars that we pour in, and the little bit of money that they give back, it's not reciprocal. We have to demand some level of reciprocity, and we have got to put the data out front and say, this is what we pour into you, and this is what you give back. We're not doing this anymore. So we've got to demand, as Sister Rahama said, that we've got to demand and not be fearful of it. Right. We've got to be fearless, as the fearless one is named, fearless when it comes to this. That's right. So that's my response, but I wanted to make one more comment whenever you want to take comments, Sister Cassandra.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so Mike, I don't know if you have a question about what we do next, but one of the things that we can do, we know that we have power, we have consumer power, we have consumer power as members of the African diaspora, as the sister said. I'm married to a Nigerian. My children are half Nigerian and half American. And my grandchildren are a fourth or whatever, or maybe more than that, because I don't know my heritage because I was born in South Carolina. But what we can do is what they did in 1774 when they did the Articles of Association that they created to bring themselves together as not just disparate colonies, but as a country. We can create our own articles of association. And particularly Black women can do that within the diaspora to say exactly what we've said here today. We're going to support Black. We're going to, all through the supply chains for various goods and services that we spend monies on. And that's a tremendous impact. We've got the resources, natural resources, much of it on the African continent that we can source from, whether it's, for shea butter or whatever it is, cocoa, whatever. We can do any and everything there. We've got relationships in terms of potential relationships with our land-grant colleges and universities. And when it comes to entrepreneurship and engineering and agricultural stuff, there's no reason why we shouldn't. And I think that the project that I'm working on at Tuskegee, State of African Americans in the Black Belt, we define the Black Belt as the 15 former slave states. That's where the slaves were the most numerous. And it's within that framework that we can begin to really connect and do what we need to do. And we can use Georgia as the example of what we can do here. But I'm excited about the possibility. I am pissed off. And I think the worst thing you can do is piss off a Black woman. That's the worst thing that you can do. And they've done it. And we're about to show, we're about to step into who we are, step into our greatness.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. I am getting ready to turn this over to Sophia. And before she says her closing remarks, I just want to say thank you, ladies, for bringing your expertise, bringing your commitment to Black people on this forum today. And I want to say to everyone else who is watching, elections are coming up, and we can't have this conversation without talking about the vote. The power of the sister vote. Dr. Tanibu, this is how we show up. We show up at that poll. We know that Black women turn out, always have turned out at the polls. This is the time that we are educating our communities and getting them ready to turn out at the polls for this upcoming election is going to be key and critical. And so I just want to thank you all so much for what you do in your communities. And what we all bring together collectively to make sure, and what I say, shifting power at the voting booth, at the policy table for Black women and girls. So thank you all so much, and I turn it back over to you, Sophia.
Wow, my heart is so incredibly full. I cannot thank you, Cassandra, all of the panelists for agreeing to participate in this conversation. I hope you saw the reaction because we were with you the entire way. We appreciate your leadership. We appreciate your passion and your devotion to us as a people. So thank you so much for your words. Thank you to the audience for joining us. We did go a little bit over, but thank you so much for sticking with us. We are having, as Cassandra said, we're going to have one more webinar in this series. The next topic is on the vote. Democracy on the ballot. We do have an election coming up, and we do want to inform all of you on what those election issues are, particularly for the Black community and low-wage workers. Cassandra will be back. She'll be a panelist this time, and that's going to happen on Monday, July 22nd. Hope you all can join us. And thank you so much for your participation. Look out for a thank you email from us with additional resources. Please stay involved, and please continue the fight.